Olur belki. Belki gelir. Çok muhterem katılımcılar.
Distinguished
Şimdi
participants,
rüzgar enerjisiyle ilgili
now about wind
rüzgar
power.
enerjisinin dünü, bugünü, yarını
We're going to talk about the past, present and future of the
değerli
Turkish
mühendis
wind
arkadaşlarımızla
energy
beraber
sector with
bir
our
tartışma
distinguished
yapma imkanı
panelists.
bulacağız inşallah.
Hopefully we'll have a chance to discuss.
10'ar dakika veya 12-13 dakikalık
Our presenters
arkadaşlarıma
will have
söz
about
vereceğim.
10 to 12 minutes
Fakat
of
mutlaka
speech,
sizlerden de soru
and if we have
almak
time,
istiyorum,
I'd like to get
istiyorum.
your questions
Böylece bir
on that
tur
matter.
yapacağız. Arif
So
arkadaşımız,
our colleague Arif,
Arif arkadaşımızın herhalde manisi çıktı,
I think there's
gelemediler.
a problem with him, so he's not here.
Ümit ederiz gelirse o da.
If he comes on time, he'll obviously be here
Ben
and
konuya
join us.
başlamadan önce
So
günü,
before I
bugünü,
start
yarını, rüzgar
about the
enerjisiyle
past,
ilgili
present and future of the Turkish
konuda
wind energy
bir açıklama yapmak
sector,
istiyorum.
I'd like to make a brief introduction.
Sektörün anası yenilenebilir enerji sektörü,
renewable
biliyorsunuz.
energy
O sektörün
sector.
içerisinde bir rükün oluyor rüzgar enerjisi ve Türkiye için en önemli.
Is very significant for Turkey, and wind energy is obviously part of that. And we have the Renewable Energy Act enacted in 2005, which covers the wind energy and also renewable energy such as solar power, wind power, biogas. For all these matters, in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, we prepared checklists making additions to the law enacted 4 years earlier. And our local and indigenous resources were prioritized in that checklist. And that was, we increased the incentive of dollar and cent amounts, and that's the list we made. And when we say past, present and future of the law,
yani kökünde bendeniz vardır desem,
obviously
yani bir şey yapmış olmam, kendime öyle özel bir iltifat
I
yapmış
can say that
sayılmam.
I've been
Çünkü
busy with this subject for a long time, and this
benim enerji
was
komisyonu başkanı
enacted in
olduğum dönemde
2005 as a law when I was the president of the
yılından
Turkish
itibaren
Grand National Assembly
devamlı enerji
Technology and Energy
komisyonu
Commission, and I
görevi
served
yaparken
as the president of that
enerjiyle
commission for
alakalı
over
bütün
7
yasalar,
years, and I obviously
nükleer enerji
contributed
yasası,
to all the
enerji
laws
yasası,
made in
yenilenebilir
that
enerji
period,
yasasına kadar,
such as
LPG
the
yasası,
Renewable Law,
bütün
the
enerjiyle
Renewable
alakalı
Energy Act, the LPG
yasaların
law, and many others.
tamamını o 7 yıllık
And
süreç
for that
içerisinde
7-year period that I
komisyonda
took
bulunan
part
diğer
in that
arkadaşlarımızla
commission
beraber
with the colleagues of mine who spent hours and days diligently and meticulously to discuss all these details, and we obviously contributed to the
uğraşlar gösterdik.
proceedings in Turkey. Also for indigenous and local resources,
Diğer
along with the
petrol
renewable
piyasasıyla,
energy
LPG
resources,
piyasasıyla ilgilenen
they
arkadaşlara
obviously
bir alternatif kaynak olarak gelmekteydi.
seem to be an
Bu bakımdan,
alternative to people who were dealing with LPG and petroleum markets. So there were some points of resistance. However, our colleagues in Parliament and in the Commission
çoğunu aştık ve bugünlere geldik.
managed to overcome all these resistant limitations. However, there are some still limitations, we have to say. And also, when we look at the dollar cent per kilowatt hours ratios, which was recommended to the
düşürdüler. Tabii bunun çeşitli sebepleri var. Biz
Parliament by our Commission was obviously lowered a few years later. Well, we don't know the exact reasons for these. However, what we thought and what we learned was that one of the reasons of that decrement was Ali Babacan, who was obviously trying to
para ödemelerini önlemek için büyük bir gayret içerisinde.
cover up the needs for the Turkish economy at that time, and obviously in order to install the financial discipline in Turkey, he did his best. So he wanted to cut on what he thought would be unnecessary costs. So a subject which was like a dream about a decade ago,
alım garantileri verelim, yüksek rakamlar verelim gibi bir düşünceye
obviously it's quite difficult to make sure or ensure that the incentives that we put in were limited by him and his commission. Maybe what he did was the right one, I don't know, but I don't think he really did very well with that. He's obviously looking at the financial side, and he's obviously having a financial point of view, but personally, and also looking at the commission that we have worked in, and we have discussed all these items, and we have Ali Mushik, for example, from the commission, who was here. I think Susan was also here, but I think she's in the other hall right now. We have really combated very hard, and we mentioned that we need the solar power, wind power, and other renewable energy resources. If we can guarantee these with high levels of procurement and purchasing, if we can give incentives to the investors, we can then pioneer the development of industry and technology in that area, but we couldn't really achieve what we wanted to do. So with regard to generation and manufacturing of technology, we're still not where we really wanted to be. We didn't really lose a lot, but we still need to do a lot of more things to do. Now, our colleagues here will obviously enlighten us more on this issue. And as we begin, I would start with Mr. Ahmet Ocak. I want them to introduce themselves before they start their presentations. As you know, I'm a deputy now, a member of the parliament, and I'm still trying to help my colleagues in the same commission. So I'd like all the speakers to introduce themselves first, and then express their opinions in a period of about 10 to 12 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I extend my deepest regards. My name is Ahmet Ocak. I started to work in the Turkish Authority of Electricity in 1983, and for 21 years I was the operational manager. Actually, I took part in the operational proceedings of a power plant in Turkey, and when the Energy Market Regulatory Authority, EPDK, was established, I started to work there, and then I took many jobs in there, many positions in there, and I'm now currently the Vice President of the Republic of Turkey Energy Market Regulatory Authority. Ever since 1980, I've taken part in the field of energy, and I have established the facility, I have done the operation, and now I'm working at the Energy Market Regulatory Authority. So I've now proceeded, let's say, to a table-side job from an on-site job. When I came to Ankara for the first time, I thought, well, if I knew the legislation, I would have never done what I've done. So, well, obviously, I want my chairman not to be offended by this joke, but we had the legislation, and after the legislation, we did some certain audits, and when the higher board of finance of Turkey came and told us that we didn't really have the authority to do what we really wanted to do. But what we actually did was quite right, because this legislation was really required to be activated or enacted. And as you know, that when you're building a line, and if you want to have a capacity of, say, 1,000 megawatts, you obviously need to establish its links. So we're talking about billions of liras here. And when you don't build these facilities, and then if you don't finish, or if you don't end the erection of the facility, then they will ask you, why did you do the side paths and not the main power plant, or the opposite? So we actually said that if you do the power plant first, then you can obviously cover up the finances later. That was the legislation that we made. Then we had a kind of probe that was set on us, about 30 million liras, and they told us that there were 3 projects, and they told us that if you actually brought this to the Commission 1 week earlier, this would not be a kind of lack of, this would not be deemed as a lack of profit by the government. So I wrote in my defense that while everything is going on so quickly, and while all the research took about a week to conclude, and also the capacity of that power plant that we were about to erect was identified, because there were some other reasons. For example, it was identified as a historical site after we started the building. So then there was a kind of general law that was helped by the Commission and assisted the Parliament to bring out a new law about this, to sort out these kind of problems. But before that, we did it through the legislation, and they told us that you need to do it in 1 week time. I said, okay, we didn't do it, but why haven't you gone into this probe for about 4 years, and why now? Anyway, after this little joke, we have to talk about our main issue. We're obviously kept under close scrutiny by investors and auditors alike. And obviously the politicians, bureaucrats, investors, they all need to take risks to develop this area. If a country is to be developed, we have no problems with punishments or even death. But the thing is that once we put our heart into all the things, we believe that we can obviously contribute to our country. Let's talk about the wind here. About 20-30 years ago, hydraulic power plants were built, and these were one of our main energy resources. Then what happened? What happened was an issue of lack of security over the supplying of electricity. And state was responsible for that, and they're still responsible for that now, and the Minister of Energy is still obviously the chief in charge for that, so we have to take necessary precautions. 20-30 years ago, hydraulic power plant's cost was about $2 to $3 million, and the natural gas price in that time was about $100. It was very cheap, as you know. So, and the natural gas power plants were started to be built, and when the supply security was a very tight issue, these were obviously started to be built, and based on the development of the country, obviously the energy demand keeps growing. So we have some crisis periods every few years, obviously, and apart from those periods, the problem in Turkey in terms of electricity has always been at a faster rate compared to the growth rate. Looking at the last 40 years, the increase of energy in Turkey was about 7%. In 1998 and in 2001, the energy growth decreased, but generally speaking, in the last few decades, energy consumption and demand always increased. Looking at the wind, and as our chairman would approve, our investors are always looking for incentives, and only once that a windmill was built by a private sector company without waiting for an incentive, and it is now the most active power plant in Turkey. Obviously, there were lobbies behind this. Okay, Spain is giving 24 cents, and Germany is giving some other figures, but you have a cheaper resource. You have hydraulic and wind resources which are cheaper. The turbines may be a little bit expensive, but 4 years ago, let's say, 1 megawatt solar power plant was built for about $3 to $5 million. And now there have been many laws about renewable sources. So now the problem with the wind turbines has been that you actually give the order, but you can't get the plant, or you can't get the turbine on time. Now, as the technologies have evolved, we're now talking about 8, 9 or 16 megawatts of turbines that are producing obviously about 15 or 8 or 9 times higher than the previously erected wind power plants and windmills. So based on this growth, we obviously have to look at ourselves and do self-criticism, and obviously we have to also look at how the investors view this issue. We did a lot of mistakes as a state, as the government, and sometimes we actually improvised, and we wanted a measurement from the wind turbine specialist, and our colleagues here would know that these were the people who built the first windmill in Turkey, and there were many people who used to measure these, and investors who were working in an auto-control manner, the ones who obviously want to cater for their own industry, were into the wind power plants. So when we saw that our industrial facilities actually kind of became our energy resource or energy plant. But after this law was enacted, these energy players, these grand players obviously went backstage, and for example, when we look at the number of projects developed by the state waterworks in Turkey for the 90 years of the Republic, we see that the number of projects they developed was 233, and only 120 of them have been approved, and 47 were BOTs, build, operate, transfer. And when you obviously give a long... There were some mistakes in the past when the latitudes and longitudes were shown wrongly. So for a project that was supposed to take part in Turkey, the map actually showed it was in Azerbaijan or Greece. So between 2003 and 2005, the same department, State Waterworks, developed about 1,600 projects. And when we look at the wind, 80,000 megawatts of applications have been received by November the 1st. We've waited for a long time to overcome these problems, and we were very meticulous, but because we didn't ask for the measure for all the applications, and the reason for that was that these measurements can only be sold. We got the registries, we got the data, we looked at the data, and then there were some big problems, so we had a criteria. I really want you to believe that the political structure and also the Energy Market Regulatory Authority doesn't really go into this business so that we want the state to make money. We actually want to transform the loss of energy that obviously takes from our current deficit to be transformed into a source for the national treasury. So we didn't ask for measurement for some of them. That was our biggest mistake. whether it was, we wouldn't have the problems whether it was a historical site or whether it was a agricultural site, so we wouldn't have the problems that we have today. So, for example, if you look at the agricultural fields,
Evet, doğru sayılır efendim.
if you look at the agricultural fields, we see that some of these fields have wrongly been allocated for wind power plants, but then obviously it needs to be changed. Now, obviously there needs to be an agreement here, and I'm a person who has made an interview with the state television TRT next to a turbine, so it was below 80 decibels. However, press, when a project goes deep into levels of practice, unfortunately in Turkey you come up against some kind of blockage, and one of the most alternatives of natural gas in Turkey is obviously coal. Obviously we need to focus on the indigenous resources and for coal, but we don't have the resources that are sufficient enough to do that, so we need to import. Now, looking at all the wind power plants of Turkey, so if we say bin megawattın üreteceği yılda maksimum 90 milyar kilowatt saat. And we look at the number of the need of the requirement of Turkish demand in 2030 is expected to be 600,000 kilowatt per hour. So if we don't erect these wind plants, if we don't erect these hydro plants, obviously we will still be dependent, we will even be more dependent on the foreign imports. However, to cater for the needs politically, what we could say is that what I'm now producing locally is, for example, the amount X, but we need the amount Y. So that's why we are currently importing more energy than it seems that we should. However, we have to make use of our local sources. We're not a very rich country with regard to indigenous resources. We obviously need imported resources, but Turkey must have or must utilize its possessed resources very well, and one of the key ways would be to establish as many nuclear plants as possible, but obviously you know the issues on that. We have made some amendments on the legislation, and obviously what we have seen is that okay, one last sentence. Moderator said 7.3 cents is not enough, but when you go to the state waterworks or the procurement of the wind power plants, we see that around per unit 230,000 euros per unit was paid, and then 4 years later, we see that the plant has not been built, and obviously the money received as cost was obviously not utilized as cost, so or expenditure. So then, how can you apply for such a procurement and delay me for 4 years? Thank you for that. For renewable resources, our target is, in wind energy for example, is to increase productivity through the use of more advanced technologies, and as we calculate that, we wanted to act in advance. So if only we could have enacted the law sooner. 17 megawatts were the Turkish wind energy sector's total in 2005. After the law was enacted, it increased to more than 400 with an investment of 360 megawatts. So in about 6 years' time, it increased almost about tenfold. So in the past, it was very difficult to order any kind of windmills, but in solar plant or in solar energy, it's the same as well. The efficiency that you get per megawatt keeps increasing. So that is our target as our R&D departments keep working on this. So also for the nuclear power plant, we also want to erect the nuclear power plant. Some of our colleagues resist that, but the main reason we want to do it for a long time is that with fusion reaction or fusion methodology, the radiation effect can be minimized in some of the new nuclear plants, and technology will develop so quickly and come to such an advanced level that it will disintegrate all the atoms, and also it will then make it much easier for everything in our daily lives, and it will be almost risk-free. Now it's like a dream. However, this is going to get real in the near future. I know that because there are professor colleagues of mine who are now focusing on inter-satellite rockets and their nuclear power plants to be built on these inter-satellite rockets. So technology will keep evolving, but if we don't get the investment into it, if we don't start from somewhere, we will keep being spectators, not generating any energy. So today you use the uranium enrichment, and in the future you may use thorium enriched generation, because in terms of the thorium levels, Turkey seems to be the biggest resource in the world. So obviously technological developments are of a crucial importance here, and renewable energy can be bought for higher prices. But so what did Spain and Germany do? They actually established the technology of that. Spain's technological outlook was very similar to Turkey. So, okay, we keep Germany out of class, so to speak, but Spain today now can develop their own technology because they have actually paid for the higher technology in the beginning, and then they develop everything themselves. So if we could do it in the beginning, if we could have done that in the beginning, maybe it would have been a different scenario. But we still have hope for the future. Now it's Erol's turn.
Teşekkür ederim Sayın Başkan.
Öbür hoparlörü de önünüze alabilirsiniz. Sol tarafınızda. Açık açık. Öyle mi peki? Açık olması lazım. Kırmızı yanacak.
Söndü güzel. Hangisine konuşuyor? Tamam. Benim adım Erol Demirer.
My name is Erol Demirer. I would like to express my deep regards. I'm an electrical engineer and I'm specialized in energy and high tension. I don't know when I was a kid that I would be interested in wind energy. I started my career working in a cable factory. We developed technologies in that factory and company, and we made, for instance, export to different very big projects in the world. And cable sector is that, it was that, and that's it. And then we decided to do something else because we wanted to grow further. And we realized that wind energy can be an option for the future. Then later we visited fairs and developments, and then we visited international organizations, important organizations, and we convinced ourselves. And at that moment it was 5,100 megawatts in the world is the installed capacity. And we decided to start immediately. And we started measurement activities in Turkey, and measurement results were good. And then to sell energy, there were two ways: build, operate, transfer, or auto-production system. And we would like to start small and we started with auto-production. And then we had the power plant and constructed and then operated it, and the calculations and estimations were nice. And then we decided to continue further, and we applied for 3 power plants with a scheme of build, operate, transfer. And then the public sector decided to stop treasury guarantee for those projects, and we were a bit concerned. And you know that the public agency would be indebted to you. They said that okay, do it, but we were concerned. And again, we started with the smaller scale project, Bozcaada. Then we did this, and after that there was no build, operate, transfer, and there would be free market. And they said that, but we had an agreement, and they said to us that there will be the Energy Market Regulatory Board be established, and our promise would be valid. They said to us. Then later, for wind, there was tender. We competed there. We provided our bid, and the tender didn't complete it. And there were many power plants with BOT, and they said that this tender was cancelled. And we actually made an investment because we trusted that tender. Again, they said that wait for the Energy Market Regulatory Board and you would be given license. We constructed and invested a factory for construction, and then we exported our products, and then the Energy Market Regulatory Board was established for license. But actually the market said that you didn't actually sell energy abroad, and how could you do it? And the banks didn't provide finance. We spent 3 years more this way, and then we had the law in Turkey, and now there was the purchasing guarantee, and projects were started to be financed better. This was the history part. Right at that moment, the installed capacity is 3,500 megawatts. 18 years ago, the amount was 5,100 megawatts. And actually, this was just 20 years. And when also we look at that, the wind energy had a future, of course. And of course, when we look at the installed capacity of the world, we are talking about 340,000 megawatts. And until the end of the year, this is going to be 360,000 megawatts. And the nuclear is 375 megawatts in Turkey. And in 2015, I suppose the installed wind power capacity will be similar to the nuclear. Of course, the capacity factor is lower, but in terms of generation, before 2020, wind power will be equal to the nuclear power plants before 2020. We are okay, but still there is a big gap between us and the world. We are talking about 340,000, but in Turkey this is 300. But when we look at the population of Turkey, this is 1%, but we are just in the medium term, we have a lot to go.
Türkiye'de rüzgar daha hızlı büyüyor.
They say
Gerçekten
that
şu
wind
anda
power
kurulu
is
olarak
growing in
Türkiye,
Turkey faster.
dünyanın
When we
%1'i
look at that,
ama
the
yeni
installed
kurulan
capacity
güç
of
olarak
Turkey is only
%3'ü.
1% of the world.
Başka bir şey yapmaya
But
gerek yok ilave
wind
kesinlikle.
power
Biz zaten
is
üç
growing
biliyoruz.
actually,
Ama ufak olduğunu
twofold
düşünüyoruz.
more than the
Aynı
other.
hesabı bebek için yapsanız,
But you know, we are very
yok.
small right at that
doğan
moment,
bir
and
bebek bir yıl
this is
sonra
very
10 kilo
normal,
olur.
you know.
3 misli seneye 30 kilo, 2 yaşında 90 kilo, çocuğu 3 yaşında
This
büyütücüye
growth
destek oluyor.
cannot
Ufak
continue
olduğunu
this
düşünüyoruz.
way. We are growing faster
Şimdi
because we are
dünyaya
very small
baktığımızda
right now.
zaten dün
And when we look at the
toplantı
world,
vardı.
especially yesterday, there was a
Mustafa
meeting.
Bey'le
I participated
bütün
with
dünyadan
Mustafa,
rüzgar
and we
dernekleri temsilcilerini getirmişler.
were
Onlarla
together
sohbet
with
ettik.
the representatives of
Gerçekten bu
the
işi
associations
hızlandırmak
of the
isteyenler
world,
8
and
euro'yla başlıyor.
especially
Belli bir hıza
they
kavuştuktan sonra,
started
ivmeye
with 8
kavuştuktan sonra
euros, and
yavaş
when there
yavaş
is an acceleration,
düşürüyorlar.
then they decrease it
Bizde
slowly.
hesap nasıl?
And what
Bizde
is
şu
the
an verilen
calculation right now?
7.3
Here we are
dolar
talking about
Ama sonra
$7.3,
bu
and
sayesinde
as
yerli
thanks
katkı
to
geldi. Şu
Sonar,
anda
there is
ulaştığımız
domestic
teknolojiyle
contribution, and
kanat
with
akülleri
the
kullanırsak
technology, when we use the
7.3
blades and the
7.7
tower,
dolar
we are
sent
talking
ediyor.
about
Bu 6,5
almost
euro sent.
6.5
hepsini yapıp 10 bin
euro,
yapsak 8
and
ancak yaparız.
it's not even 8.
Ama hani daha onun değiliz.
But
Dolayısıyla
of
biz şu anda
course, here
yavaş ilerliyoruz. Hani
we
Türkiye'de
are
deniyor ki hani
having
Türkiye'nin
baby
rüzgarı
steps
iyidir, bu
now.
rüzgar da size yeter.
Everybody
Bir
says that
hareketliğe
wind is okay in
gerek yok.
Turkey,
Ben
but
şuna
it's not the
benziyorum.
case. We need, of
iklimimiz
course,
güzel,
some incentive. It's
toprağımız
not correct. You
sadece
have
su versek
climate,
yeter,
and
gübreye gerek yok.
you have good
Öyle de hani
soil, so you don't need
biraz
fertilizer.
gübre
We
parası
cannot say
versek
this.
ağacımız çok daha fazla meyve verecek. Şu anda
Because
da
with fertilizer, we will have more trees and more fruits. Right at that moment, unfortunately, we don't have fruits. This is actually an acronym that I'm trying to explain the situation. It's now 3,500 megawatts in Turkey, and this is just little effect on decreasing on importation of energy. And if we increase this installed capacity, we will decrease the imported energy amount in Turkey. So this is very important. If we continue with this pace, then we will have less 2.5 million dollars of importation. There is the base tariff. This is 7.3, and local contribution. It's possible to receive it 5 years, but it's on paper, because when we look at that in the law, it was enacted in the year 2010. We were supposed to use it in 2010, but we couldn't, because we started to use it in the last month of 2011. They say that if you use this 1 month, then you will lose 1 year. Then we started to use it in 2012. And also it's a local or domestic contribution. None of the raw materials could be international. They changed the regulation accordingly, then it's no more a must. And for the quality of it, the quality certificate is necessary. They said this to us. And especially we would like to have actually semi-qualified products, of course, and those products must be qualified. You know, turbine is sold as a whole, as one piece, and there is no quality certificate for the blade, and the quality certificate is valid for the turbine itself as a whole. If you buy a car, you have the quality certificate for the car, not for the door, for instance. But they ask for quality certificates of the blades, for instance, and we lost 1 more year. And 3 years out of 5 years were over this way. So it's not possible to get benefit of the local contribution for 5 years, because there is just 2 years left. In some power plants, the tower is local, but blade is not, and some of them vice versa. And some of them are both local, and they say that just make it all local, otherwise it's not possible to consider it local. Public sector, the government actually made those type of assumptions in time, so we lost the track.
yerli katkı ek miktarı
Why we are talking about local contribution? Of course, this is reason for taking investment to Turkey. The tower was produced in Turkey. Right now, the blade is producing as well. But I would like to add blade again. But it's not possible for me to receive local benefit, local contribution for the blade because it was only the tower when actually the procedure was established. Actually, there is no difficulty in calculation. You can provide the contribution in, percentages, in ratios, it's possible. Because right at that moment, the practice is not real. Because the law, unfortunately, provided us some delays. We lost 3 years of that contribution. When we look at the local investor in Turkey, we need to have a market. Otherwise, the investor do not want to construct an investment in here or make an investment in Turkey. There's a need for a solution. I think this situation is solved. I don't think so. Ahmet knows it better. Microphone is needed.
Evet. Yapıldı herhalde.
Yani şu anda bir türbünün yerlik oranı daha azsa bütün santral ondan alıyor. O da çok kayıpları ve
This system is a little bit disadvantageous right now. This practice, I hope, will be corrected in the future, because otherwise we are losing money every year. Because we import energy for generation, so those potentials must be utilized in Turkey, because Turkey has a huge potential. It's not possible to give only water to the tree to receive fruit. You need fertilizer as well. Thank you.
Teşekkür ederim. Ahmet Bey, ilave edeceğiniz bir şey var mı?
Ahmet, anything to add? Maybe I can say a couple of more words. Those are decisions to be taken by the political will. In solar energy, we started with incentives, especially you see different solar panels around Turkey, and their number was increased very fast thanks to this incentive system. But as my colleague stated, I would like to produce the solar cell in Turkey as well and make it 100% local. But there's a need for a factory. The factory needs order for 300 megawatts per year. Otherwise, the factory will cannot get any profit. So, for 300 megawatts of, for instance, order, if I actually assign it to that local producer, then that is going to be actually an incentive to the local investors. Actually, we need to think about that. We need to actually give the person a license to actually produce such a factory to produce, for instance, solar cells. But first of all, you need to have the technology, and then you can have those type of factories and facilities and etc. Without technology, it's not possible. And also for a local producer of solar cell, they need to also consider exportation, because it's not possible to receive 100% order from the country itself.
Evet, Kenan Bey, buyurun.
Kenan?
Teşekkürler. Ben de öncelikle bütün katılımcıları saygıyla selamlıyorum.
Thank you.
My
name is Kenan Ayfahri. I graduated from Middle East Technical University, Civil Engineering Faculty in 1991. I worked at the university a couple of years, and since 1996 I have been working in the energy sector in different branches, but mainly in investor companies. And we are trying to have energy investments in Turkey. Erol explained the situation in details and discussed about the incentive issue. Especially, we are talking about the
burada otururken aklıma
past,
geldi.
present, and future of
Sokrat,
Turkish wind energy
tek
sector.
bildiğim hiçbir
While
şey
I was staying
bilmediğini
here, I
demiş.
remember
Bunu
the
tabii hiçbir
saying
şey
of
bilmediği
Socrates.
için değil,
He,
esasında
said,
bu konu hakkında ne kadar
I know that
bilgi
I don't know
edinirsek,
anything.
öğrenecek ne
And
kadar çok şey olduğunu fark
it is
ettiğinden
valid actually
söylüyor.
because there are always other
Rüzgar
things to
sektöründe
learn.
biz yatırımcılar
And
için
in
biraz
terms
öyle.
of the wind sector, the situation is the
Ağırlıklı olarak
same. And
90'lı yıllarda
in the year 90s, there are BOT models and there were projects, and after that, in 2001, Energy Market Regulatory Board, and 2005, the first tender. And then the investor character was given to the private sector for the first time, and this, required a learning curve. We learned all together. In the beginning, everything was naive, and it was easier to solve the problems, and also we had less contact with the authority. But when the power plants were started to be constructed, and they were not very much in number, but there was an attraction and there was huge demand. Right now, actually, we are a bit in a good position, I can say, because there is a steady increase every year. Minimum 500 megawatts is added, and there is no reason to make it 1,000 megawatts every year.
Ancak tabii dediğim gibi
Of course, as I said, the sector is learning, the investors are learning, and we are learning together. The legislation is changed all the time, and investors are seeking for advantages. Sometimes legislation brings advantages, sometimes disadvantages. Maybe I can give an example. When we are talking about an investment procedure and look at to an investment, 1 year measurement needs to be also taken into consideration, and for that investment having the pre-license, and then at the very end having the power plants in operation, it's 6 years, and this is long and difficult. And in this process, what is very important in terms of the investors is that the frequently amended legislation. This is very important for the investor. The investor decides for an investment, but the investor needs to see the risks. They foresee the risks, and then it's possible to have progress. And there are unclarities, and if they are overcome shorter, then those investments will be in effect shorter. Again, I think last year there was an issue related to the licenses taken in the area of forests. I suppose this problem is solved and there is a system now. And if you stay in that framework, then I suppose both the investors and the Energy Market Regulatory Board and the ministry, all the ministries, environment or forestry or energy, if we stay in the system framework, the investments can be put into effect soon. Thank you.
Teşekkür ederim. Efendim, az bir vaktimiz var. Belki
We
soru
have little
alabiliriz.
time. Maybe we can have questions if you have any.
Dinleyicilerden, arkadaşlardan, katılımcılardan.
Any
sormak
question
isteyen
from the
varsa
hall?
lütfen beyefendiye 3 sual alalım mümkünse.
Let's take 3 questions.
Buyurun, isminizi söyleyin. Kime sormak
Introduce yourself first. My name is Ömer Faruk Erdem. I'm from an energy company from Trabzon. My question is to Ahmet. Before, I'm sorry, 2015 pre-license applications and after 2015 pre-license applications, time, geography, what do you think about that? And before 2015, can you just let us know about the procedure that is waiting for us? And another question is to Soner. There are cancelled licenses.
Düşünceleriniz neler?
And what do you think about those cancelled licenses?
Teşekkür ederiz. Başka soru var mı efendim?
Any other
Soruları tam
question?
alalım.
Let's take all the questions first.
Beyefendi, kim elini kaldırıyor? Göremiyorum.
I cannot see. Any other question?
Oradan bir ses geldi ama. Başka soru yok herhalde.
No further question then,
Peki,
okay.
teşekkür ederiz. Ben
Thank you.
Şey diyeyim, ondan sonra Sayın Ocak siz şey yaparsınız. Yani iptal edilen lisanslarla alakalı
About the cancelled licenses,
ne yapılabilir konusu var.
what
Tabii onu
can we
bilmiyorum.
do? Actually, I don't
Eğer
know.
yapılmış iptaller hukuki olarak
If those
iptallerse,
cancellations or
yapacak bir
terminations
şey yok.
are
Ama bazı
legally correct
hukuki olmayan
and
veya
made
hala
in the
haklı
due
olduğu
manner,
iptallerden varsa,
then
bunlar
there is
için yeni
nothing to do.
müracaatlar
But
yapabilir.
if they are
Mahkemeye
not
diyelim açıkta.
legal, then
Hatta
I
mahkemeye
suppose
gidebilir. Onun
they
dışında
need to
bilmiyorum,
apply
ben
to the
çok fazla
courts.
bir iptal de
And
olduğunu
I
sanmıyorum.
don't think those
Çünkü şey
cancellations
var
or
yani,
terminations are very much
teminatların-
in number, because here we are talking about huge amount of
teminatların nakde çevrilmesi
guarantees,
söz
and
konusu.
you know they
Ama
are
bu teminatların da ben
cashed
az olduğu
in
kanaatindeyim.
those type of circumstances.
Demin de tartıştık.
We discussed it before, but maybe those guarantees, the amount of guarantees can be increased in the future because they are not so much in amount. Actually, for 10 megawatts, 6% of the investment cost, and then it's 4% and 2%. And in the Turkish Parliament, they said that there must be a limit, and they said that 10% maximum. It's written as maximum 10%. And also investors say something else, because we are hereby talking about natural gas in terms of supply security for 1,000 megawatts of a project. They are talking about $135 million of cost. I'm not just talking about the license. This is for the pre-license and preliminary license. And after that, you know, there is environmental impact assessment, there are other approvals and licenses, etc. And if you cannot have the license itself, then it is actually a problem. I mean, it's not related to the letter of guarantee only, because hereby we are talking about the guarantee, but even, you know, this is also a burden on the shoulders of the investors. We are not just focused on the letter of guarantees, but we just would like to have the finance get into the investment. But, you know, those type of principles are sometimes abused, and then you need to have counter rules or principles. According to the termination or cancellation, there is the provisional article in the law, Article 9, and the previous law was worse. And right now, a power plant which is in operation, it is taken back to pre-license period, preliminary license period. This was real. 5 years ago, there was a power plant. It is now in operation, and it was commissioned according to the law on that year. And wind power plants are public sector, you know, but they are different from natural gas power plants, if you have the license. But for hydro and for wind and solar, it's not, because we are hereby talking about a public area. Even though you have the power plant, you own it, you cannot dismantle it and take it back. If the license is 49 years, and after 49 years later, you need to tender out for that again a power plant, because there is the right of the wind and water and sun. This is a public resource. And after 49 years, it doesn't matter, there has to be another tender for that power plant which was in operation for 49 years. And if the capacity is okay and everything is okay, I don't actually have anything, but we need to take some measures. For instance, up to now, I have another alternative. In hydropower plants, especially after the license is given, you need to pay this for escalation, and when you are in operation. But I have, for instance, as per the regulation, 19 power plants were tendered out with cash. 10 megawatt power plant, and we are talking about $25 million. And right now, this power plant is in operation, and the others are not, because especially if you have the escalation, and this is 4, but it was in 1.5. If you are going to give it 4 to the public sector, how can you pay back? The state hydraulic works paid a higher amount of prices, but this amount, will be paid later in 10 years, because the loans have duration of 10 years or even 12 years. And after 10 years, you need to pay back to the state in escalation. It's okay, it's logical, but if you add some, more difficulties and challenges, this is making the situation more difficult. This legislation needs to be amended. And also about the cancellation, I have a recommendation to the minister. Right now, we are talking about power plants, especially of 2,200 megawatts, but especially the area was an archaeologically protected area, for instance. Then the person was banned for tenders. Actually, the energy market, regulatory law, etc., everything is okay, but this is a measure, this is a precaution, and hereby we need to focus on investment. Just we would like to have the real investors in the market, of course, but we have tendered down many actually power plants, and I also announced further thousands, and I don't know what is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen for those power plants, why they cannot get into operation because of maybe the environmental impact assessment or others, and etc. Related to the environmental impact assessment, I suppose you see the reports first, then give the license, I suppose. Yes, it is the case this year, but it was not before. This is a recent practice. Those power plants, they have some, for instance, construction permits are cancelled. And also there are some power plants constructed in forest areas, then their construction permits are not are cancelled. Those type of things cancelled, those cancellations made after I gave the license to the power plant. This is the reason that we have problem today, and unfortunately we have problems. And we need to take those measures because of those. Of course, there were disadvantages for some operators. There was an operator of a power plant with an installed capacity of 2,200 megawatts, and when I cancel the license, then that operator becomes banned for tenders for 3 years. This has a very bad effect. Why it's banned for 3 years? If your license is cancelled, because it's written in the law, when your license is cancelled, then for 3 years you cannot make any investment. You cannot apply for any license for 3 years. So, I am saying this, the cancellation of license, when it is hurried by the banks, this also actually creates anxiety among the other investors, banks, and etc. The law needs to be revised in this respect. I have a recommendation. There are also operators to get into this problem, not to be banned for the tenders, but they are, for instance, okay to provide two folds of, for instance, guarantee. You need to take this into consideration, and so we need to criticize ourselves as a public sector. For instance, if an operator goes to a municipality and would like to take a permit, and municipality asks for a fee, 1 million Turkish liras, for instance, but actually I'm not earning even half of it, but you need to pay it, say the actually municipality. But this power plant was already in practice, and the rules are changed, and there's a need for a permit from the municipality now. They applied for it, even though they were working for instance, 5 years. Their licenses were cancelled, unfortunately, and the other power plants may suffer some similar problems because this law has those provisions. In preliminary license, except for force majeure circumstances, and for the license, including force majeure and uncontrolled conditions, and in provisional articles, only force majeure. As a bureaucrat, how can you implement this law? Because there are differences in the articles, because among the force majeure circumstances, reasons that are not related to the operator. The law actually is written this way, and it's a mistake, I suppose, I don't know. And we also wish that if you apply to the municipality or the Ministry of Forestry, but the municipality didn't give you a reply for months, this is a reason which is not under the control of the operator, but unfortunately this is not accepted. The law is this way, and unfortunately 30 licenses were cancelled, and now they are going to be reviewed, but I don't know actually what's going to happen. There is huge effort needs to be spent, I don't know, but they will become banned to enter into activities. There was a regional hospital, for instance, actually a tender, and then the bank asked the operator that your wind license is going to be cancelled, so I'm gonna revise your financial conditions. The bank asks for the operator and says this. So the wind sector can have an effect on other sectors as well. And those cancellation of the licenses, cashing of the letter of guarantee, and providing a ban for the operators to have an application for the license, those type of provisions should be considered again. Because it's not fair to ban the operator or the investor to apply for another license for 3 years. So this is not fair. So you need to consider all those matters. We need to consider. We need to revise and amend the legislation. Also for the power plants under 10 megawatts. I don't know, but in wind energy there are new tenders, or actually I really don't know. So we have many problems going on in the field. Maybe I can give an answer to the second question. It's about for April 2015. The schedule is valid end of April. So you need to have meteorological measurements, and also for 1 year the measurements should be there, and also for solar and wind applications. October, I suppose, it was decided. For solar and wind, in October, the applications will be received. In 2005, we had to take twice applications. But actually, we don't know the capacity right now. Maybe it's going to be announced later, but I don't know. We are waiting for the announcement from the ministry. Secondly, in wind, we need to receive applications, but we don't know the capacity yet. Of course, all those cancellations, etc., needs to be taken into consideration, and new investments will be realized, and after that, the capacity will be announced. And after that, every October, we will explain or announce the capacities for solar and wind. I think in 2015 we would have twice, but in practice, it's not going to be possible. It's going to be just for once.
Teşekkür ederiz. Tabii arkadaşlar,
Thank you.
Sanıyorum bir sual de yok. Konuşmalar.
There is no
tamamlamış
further
durumda.
question, and we complete the
yarın
session. We
itibariyle
discussed the past,
ben
present, and
şunu
future of the
söylemek istiyorum.
Turkish
Sonra
wind energy
yenilenebilir
sector, but
enerji,
I would
gerek
like to
rüzgar
say
olsun,
something
gerek
else.
güneş
It doesn't
olsun.
matter, solar, wind.
Yani
We are talking
herkesin
about renewable
teorilerine ve
energy
ifadelerine
resources, and
göre
based on all theories
geleceğin
and statements,
enerjisidir.
this is the energy
İstihdam
for
yönlerinden
future.
çok büyük
In
imkan
terms
vardır.
of
Gençlerin
employment,
bu
there are
istikamete alaka
opportunities, and
göstermeleri.
young people
Ve
need to
bir
focus
santral
on
kurulduktan sonra ben
this
sonra nasıl
area.
iş bulabilirim gibi hiçbir
And
düşünceye
don't
asla
be
kapılmamalı.
concerned and
Zaten daha önceki elektrik
actually
mühendisi,
anxious
kömürde
about to
çalışmış, başka yerde çalışmış
get
arkadaşlarımızın
actually
gelip rüzgarda şu anda
unemployed
hizmet
after
vermekte
the end
olduklarını
of the
görüyoruz.
project time. You
Şu
can
anda ne
see
istihdam bakımından bir sorun var, ne
it
de
doesn't
başka
create any
bir
problem
konu
in terms of
itibariyle.
employment, and it's
Ayrıca
going to
öyle
be a
teoriler
bright
var.
future
Mesela,
for us. There are also some other theories.
2050 yılında
For instance, in the year
dünyanın tüm
2050,
enerjisinin sadece güneşten
all the energy
üretileceği
can be
istikametinde
actually
şeyler var,
generated
teoriler
from
var.
solar energy. This is
Bazı
also an
büyük firmaların
extreme
Afrika'da büyük sahrada güneşle alakalı
theory. And
yerler
also in
edindiklerini,
Africa,
onlardan
you
elde
know,
ettikleri
there
güneş
are
enerjisiyle
areas for solar energy generation. There are plans and ideas and projects, and those are look like today a dream, but it's not for the future. There is a bright horizon waiting for the world. So thank you for your participation and for your contribution.